The Chicago Bears are finally getting their starting cornerbacks healthy again coming off of injured reserve, but Dennis Allen can't catch a break because now all three of his starting linebackers are at risk of missing Sunday's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, I want to go through the Chicago Bears injuries, where the good news is coming at corner and really in the secondary more generally. The bad news all stacking up at linebacker and how those changes will affect the game against the Steelers. We'll check in on some other spots too, with some bangs, some bruises and bumps on the offensive line, in the running backfield as well. So some good mix of good news and bad news, and we'll look at it all in the context of Sunday's game. Let's start with, I think, the bigger concern here, and that's the Chicago Bears linebacking core. Now, all of a sudden, decimated by injuries. And that's been such a weird trend for this team this season, where when they have injuries, it seems to really stack in similar places at the same time. You know, for a while, it's been the cornerback position that we'll talk about in a little bit with, Jaylon Johnson and Kyler Gordon missing a bunch of games, and we even saw Tyreek Stevenson get banged up last week, and they've been scraping the bottom of the barrel at the cornerback spot for a lot of the season. It's like, man, why is everybody getting hurt at that same spot? Well, now those cornerbacks are getting healthier, and we'll check in on them, but at the same time, it's not just, TJ Edwards has missed the last couple of games, but now on top of that, Tremaine Edmonds isn't practicing for the first 2 days this week, and Noah Sewell isn't practicing. All three of your Chicago Bears starting linebackers are on the injury report this week as DNP through the first 2 days of practice. They're the only two players, or the only three players, I should say, that have been full DNPs through the first 2 days of practice. Some guys have been DNPs and then came back. Some guys have been limited. Some guys have gotten better. Some guys have gotten worse. But it's very clearly concentrated right now with Tremaine Edmonds' groin injury. Obviously, Edwards is dealing with a couple different things, and Noah Sewell's got an elbow injury. There was a point against the Vikings where it looked like Edmonds seemed to tweak that groin and was injured in that game. So, it's not as though these injuries kind of popped up out of nowhere. It's just, for some reason, it's all happening at the same spot. Like, there's really no defensive linemen on the injury report this week. Really no wide receivers or tight ends on the injury report this week. It's a lot of defensive linemen. There's a few offensive linemen we'll talk about in a little bit too, but it's a real concern. It's one thing when TJ Edwards is out, but you got Edmonds, and we've seen Noah Sewell be, a number 3 starter, not playing particularly well, but at least someone who has the experience now in the defense that, knows the responsibilities and knows what they're supposed to do. And maybe he misses some tackles and isn't great in coverage, but at least he knows what he's supposed to be doing out there. But when you've got Edmonds and Edwards and Sewell all sidelined, well, now you're really starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel at that position, where as of right now, if those three guys indeed can't go as expected, your starting linebackers against the Pittsburgh Steelers will likely be 4th-round rookie Ruben Hippolyte and, former free agent waiver wire addition DeMarco Jackson, who just joined the Bears, earlier this season, or, earlier this sort of like preseason, if I'm not mistaken. It was August 27th when the Bears claimed DeMarco Jackson off of waivers from the New Orleans Saints. But your two starting linebackers in this game, assuming the injuries play out the way they are currently set to, would be making their first career starts together at the same time. And then, Eamon Onbagbamiga would be your number 3 linebacker. And that's a special teams player who has never been able to really carve out a defensive role in his NFL career. It's one thing if you have to throw in your 4th-round rookie, Ruben Hippolyte, but you've got Tremaine Edmonds next to him to give him a hand here, or you got TJ Edwards in there to kind of be the veteran presence. But when you've got 2 guys going in there making their first career starts who have not played a lot of defensive snaps in their NFL careers. I mean, DeMarco Jackson is in his 3rd season, and he's been a special teams guy his whole career, and Ruben Hippolyte is obviously a rookie. And Eamon Onbagbamiga is, then the most experienced of the group, although he's only in his 5th season. He made 2 starts as a rookie with the Chargers back in 2021, but really, these are all special teams players. These are not guys that are getting a lot of first-team reps at practice throughout training camp or the preseason, and guys that you don't really want to have to count on as full-time defensive players, that you could maybe get by with one of them out there, but 2 is a real concern, especially because we know that the Pittsburgh Steelers offense likes to use a lot of tight end heavy personnel. They'll go 2 or even 3 tight ends on the field a lot because Arthur Smith likes that personnel, and then also their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, and also they've got some depth at tight end in Pittsburgh, where Darnell Washington was kind of the big highlight machine last week at 6'7", 311 pounds running over guys. But they traded for Jonnu Smith from the Miami Dolphins, who's been a playmaker in the league for a long time. And then Pat Freiermuth has kind of been their lead tight end the last couple of years. They like to get all 3 of those guys involved. And if I'm the Steelers and I know the Bears have injuries at linebacker, of course, I'm going to put the tight ends on the field as much as possible and force Chicago to take cornerbacks off the field where they're getting healthier and put linebackers on the field to try and match that personnel. Because you could sit there and say, well, maybe instead of a linebacker, could you use a 3rd safety and have Jaquan Brisker come up and play more of a linebacker and then have a couple safeties behind him? We've seen CJ Gardner-Johnson has been a pretty physical slot cornerback who maybe, he's certainly not a linebacker, but, could he be in the box and play? I mean, he's played strong safety before in his career. He's not I want to say he's not undersized because he's only 5'11", but 210 pounds. He's got some bulk for a cornerback, but that can only go so far when the Steelers are playing with basically 6 offensive linemen out there with Darnell Washington, and they do some 6 offensive line stuff, and 3 tight ends is you need linebackers. You just need size and strength and bulk to match that. I mean, unless the Bears go 5 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers to try and pair that. And we've seen Dennis Allen do a little bit of a 5-man defensive line, but I don't envy him trying to come up with a strategy here because it's already tough enough to make it work with 2 new linebackers with DeMarco Jackson and Ruben Hippolyte and guys that, there's a reason Noah Sewell's been playing over them, even though Noah Sewell hasn't played particularly well. Clearly, if these guys were hidden gems on the bench, they would have found more opportunities to get them on the field, especially with TJ Edwards hurt the last couple of weeks. And so I think your fingers are crossed that one of these 3 starters can participate in practice a little bit on Friday and give you enough of something to maybe be able to play on Sunday. I mean, I think Tremaine Edmonds is someone who might not need to practice all week to still be able to play in the game, but man, I don't like my matchups there. I don't like it in the running game where we know, Hippolyte is still trying to sort of get settled in the NFL and kind of learn his run fits, and also he's not the biggest guy. He's a more athletic guy, but not necessarily the bulkiest, strongest linebacker there. He's 5'11", 235 is what he's listed at, but he's no TJ Edwards out there. So, but then also in the passing game, right? If they're working over the middle of the field and dumping it off to Calvin Austin with 4.4 speed, or Roman Wilson's got some speed, or these tight ends are certainly athletic guys working over the middle, I worry about that as a big matchup. At least for Dennis Allen, he can take some solace in feeling like, well, the cornerback position is getting healthier, so maybe he has to help them less and can focus more of his scheme on trying to mitigate some of the challenges at linebacker. So we'll take a look at the latest on Jaylon Johnson and Kyler Gordon and how that could change things for this Chicago Bears defense on Sunday. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season. Whether you're following the Bears, the NFL, the NBA, or all the above, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, it's really cool. PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. And if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates. So you could choose more or less on Caleb Williams' passing yards, DeAndre Swift's rushing yards, Rome Odunze's receiving touchdowns, or any player, any team, any sport. Just download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. It's good to be healthier in this Chicago Bears secondary, where finally some good news at the cornerback position that has been decimated since really what feels like week 1. I don't know that we've seen this Bears secondary spend much time fully healthy, because even when they started to get healthy for a small stretch there, guys got hurt again. This is Kyler Gordon's back on injured reserve. Jaylon Johnson's on injured reserve, and we've been seeing a lot of Deshaun Wright, and Tyreek Stevenson's a starter for sure, and then Nick McLeod, and finally they had to pull the trigger and grab C.J. Gardner-Johnson just to stop some of the bleeding there, and he's been an upgrade in the slot for sure. But now Jaylon Johnson looks full speed ahead to play on Sunday. I mean, certainly at the time I'm recording this podcast on Thursday night, he has not formally been activated off of injured reserve and promoted back to the 53-man roster. But as a full participant in Thursday's practice, it's as good a sign of any that he will be good to go on Sunday. A little less clear for Tyreek Stevenson and Kyler Gordon. Both were limited on Wednesday and Thursday. Obviously, Stevenson left the game against the Vikings after colliding with, I think it was Brisker on that play, and then tried to come back and then left the game again, so we're not exactly sure. And Gordon's been on injured reserve for 4 weeks, so it's hard to be confident that after 2 days of limited practice, is Kyler Gordon for sure going to be ready to come off injured reserve and play against the Steelers? I'm not certain there. They may want to take an extra week and have him be ready for next Friday's game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But even just adding Jaylon Johnson back will be huge, super critical for this Bears secondary, especially in a matchup like this against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they have one good receiver that really scares you, and everybody else, it's not to say that they're not talented, but DK Metcalf is on a different scale and caliber of player than talented receivers in Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson and Scotty Miller. Like, they get those guys involved, and they're good players that you can't completely overlook. But boy, to be able to stick Jaylon Johnson on DK Metcalf and just not worry about it that much is such a luxury for Dennis Allen to be able to have, especially with the injuries at linebacker. Because I think if you didn't have Jaylon Johnson out there or Kyler Gordon, and you had Deshaun Wright on one side trying to match up with that, I would be inclined to say, hey, I got to give him a lot of safety help. Like, the Steelers and Rodgers don't throw deep that much, but if there's any deep receiver you want to throw to in the NFL, it is the 6'3", 230-pound DK Metcalf working on the sideline. And they do have speed with Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. And I don't like the idea of Deshaun Wright trying to win that one-on-one battle down the sideline a bunch. I'd like having safety help there, but then if your safeties have to be over the top to help your cornerbacks, they're farther away from the box, they can't help your linebackers as much. But I feel a lot more confident, not that you're always just going to leave Jaylon Johnson one-on-one every single play against DK Metcalf, but more confident in Dennis Allen being able to allocate his schematic resources, if you will, the safety help, the rotation of coverages, etc., to allocate that more towards masking linebacker deficiencies, knowing that you've got some return at the cornerback spot. And that only gets amplified the healthier they get there, right? If you get Jaylon Johnson back and Tyreek Stevenson's good to go and Kyler Gordon, I mean, you can see both of those guys get activated off injured reserve and have a quote-unquote fully healthy secondary. I say that because, even these guys are playing, I don't know that Kyler Gordon's going to be 100% or Stevenson is going to be 100% if they've been limited at practice all week. But at least to have your full cast of starters out there gives you so much more flexibility to be more aggressive as a defensive coordinator, to trust your cornerbacks a little bit more. And then to get more creative, even with somebody like C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Dennis Allen talked about how, hey, they'd love to have too many good players where they're not sure what to do with them. And C.J. Gardner-Johnson is the type of versatile defensive back athlete that if and when Kyler Gordon returns, whether it's this week or not, Gordon's going to be your primary slot cornerback. That would normally put C.J. Gardner-Johnson on the bench, and it will, sort of. But I think they will find a good role for Gardner-Johnson when Dennis Allen likes to go to those dime package looks where he has 6 defensive backs on the field. And this season, when he has opted for that, typically the number 6 defensive back that they put on the field has been, well, at first it was Jonathan Owens. In more recent weeks, it's been Elijah Hicks. I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson represents a better option than either of them, because Gardner-Johnson's played slot for the Bears, but he's been a safety before for the Eagles and the Lions, and he was more a slot for Dennis Allen and the Saints, but he's got the positional versatility that, in certain packages, right? You're not making him a full-time, every down deep safety just yet in this defense, because you've got Brisker and Byard, but if he needs to rotate back there every once in a while, especially in certain blitz packages where maybe you want to blitz Brisker, blitz Byard, and you can have C.J. Gardner-Johnson kind of fill in for him and make it hard for the quarterback to know when and where that guy's going to line up and what area of the field he's going to be covering. He doesn't fit nicely into a box of okay, we know he's in the slot, so he's going to be in coverage here. It's no, he could be just about anywhere on the field. Not that you're going to totally fool Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career, but you just have, if you could just make him have to think or read for an extra half a second, that can be the difference between, a pass rusher affecting the quarterback and not being able to get close enough to him to affect the play. And those kind of things are the ways Dennis Allen can try to make up for it. I mean, at the end of the day, if they get one of their receivers or tight ends matched up on a linebacker of yours who's just struggling, whether it's Ruben Hippolyte or DeMarco Jackson or whoever, there's only so much you can scheme and draw up and blitz and rotate as a defensive coordinator. At some point, guys got to win one-on-ones and guys are going to lose one-on-ones, and it's just a matter of sort of trying to overcome and mitigate those losses as much as you can. But boy, the job becomes just that much easier the more health you get at the cornerback position. So I'm optimistic about that group continuing to get better. I'm less optimistic about the long-term stability there, just because I think we've been fooled by this already this season where Kyler Gordon's hurt, Kyler Gordon goes back, great. And then a couple weeks later, he's gone again. Jaylon Johnson's misses all the training camp preseason. He comes back, he's good to go, great. And then a couple weeks later, he's down again. He's on IR and might miss the rest of the season, right? And now he's coming back again. But with these types of soft tissue type of injuries, I don't know that they fully heal or they fully get back to full durability and strength. It's just more they get back to, can you play through it? And there's still I think a re-injury risk. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't know the specifics of their situations. I just, given that we've seen both of those guys already this season get hurt more than once, now that they come back, I can't just be blindly trusting that, they're good for the rest of the season. Well, you hope so. That's the plan, but also got to keep open the possibility that you could get these guys back for 2 or 3 games and then there's another injury, right? That's just, then these injuries tend to lead to more injuries in season. So I worry about how long this newfound cornerback health will last. But hey, they need it more than ever against the Steelers with the linebacker injury, so I'll certainly take it while they can get it. Also, some other injuries to keep an eye on. Some good news, some bad news when it comes to the offensive line, when it comes to the running back position, and a couple of other spots with just a couple of starters making some progress in the positive direction to talk about as well. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime. We're in the full swing of the NFL season, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans, cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a major hassle between queues and login screens and the prices jumping up at checkout when you finally do get those tickets. It can be super frustrating, but that's why I love Gametime. I've got the app on my phone and I use it all the time. I've used it to go to Bears games, to go to basketball games, concerts, comedy shows, theater events. They've got it all in the Gametime app. And the process is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee, where you're always getting 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all of those fees are included in the price. So the price you see is the price you pay, nothing jumping up at the end. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKED on NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. So I think the biggest, clearest movement on this Bears injury report is linebackers down bad, cornerbacks trending in the positive direction, headlined by Jaylon Johnson. But there's some other injury situations just to keep an eye on. I think I'm a little bit less, or I'll say these are a little bit less concrete. We don't know exactly what's going on here, and I think generally there's a cautious optimism here that I don't want to get out of ourselves and start panicking that anytime anybody misses a practice, does that mean the sky is falling for him too? But we talk about some concentrations of injuries at linebacker and cornerback. Starting to just see a lot of those bumps and bruises showing up on the offensive line, where at practice so far this week, we saw the right tackle Darnell Wright limited with a pec and a back injury. That can't feel good. That's the front and the back of the same part of the body. Limited for 2 days of practice, but he hasn't missed games yet, so not fully worried. You've got Drew Dahlman limited both times with a knee injury. Again, he's been playing, so limited isn't DNP, so I think you don't got to panic there yet. But then the one that kind of jumps out at me is left tackle Theo Benedict. Full participant on practice on Wednesday, no injury designation on Wednesday. But then all of a sudden on Thursday, he's added to the injury report out of nowhere, limited with a quad injury. And the fact that he's limited and not a DNP tells me, hey, no panic yet. No need to fear. But you do worry about a midweek injury popping up as opposed to Darnell Wright's been kind of dealing with stuff all season. And he's not 100%, but he's been able to play through it. I think he'll be okay. And Drew Dahlman's had some soreness and stuff. I think he'll be okay. But when guy pops up with new injury, not suffered on a game day, it's wait. What happened there? Is that just a really, really minor, hey, pulls a quad at practice, but they they massage it out and whatever, he's fine, he's good to go? Or, you worry about does Friday pop up and he goes from limited to DNP and then questionable for Sunday, right? Again, not going to get ahead of ourselves, not going to panic here, but the Bears just don't have a lot of tackle depth right now with Braxton Jones on injured reserve. We saw against the Vikings, Theo Benedict did leave for one play with an injury, but again, didn't cause him to miss practice on Wednesday or have an injury designation on Wednesday, so that's the question here. But Ozzie Trapillo, rookie second-round pick, came in for that one snap at left tackle, but we know that they tried him at left tackle in the preseason and wasn't performing well there, and that's how he lost the left tackle battle to Theo Benedict. And so I'm not so convinced that if he has to play more time at left tackle that now all of a sudden he would be a lot better. I think if Theo Benedict can't go on Sunday for some reason, or even suffers an injury in game, they ran Theo Benedict out there, or they ran Ozzie Trapillo out there against the Vikings, but if it was something a little bit more serious, even if it's just a one-game thing, I would be more inclined to maybe just move Joe Thuney from left guard to left tackle. I mean, it depends on the severity of the injury, right? If it's one drive, you can throw Ozzie Trapillo out there. If it's one game, I don't know. Maybe you can throw Ozzie Trapillo out there for one game if it's going to be a multi-week thing or something, which, again, doesn't look like it's going to be that case. I think I would rather move Joe Thuney over there and then bring in Ryan Bates or Luke Newman at guard than trying to throw Ozzie Trapillo into the fire, or it's talking you flip Darnell Wright to the left tackle spot and then put Ozzie Trapillo at right tackle. That's not to get too carried away with ourselves here. For now, let's keep our fingers crossed that this whole offensive line will play on Sunday, even if they're not 100%. Some injuries mounting at the running back position, though, that maybe are a little bit more concerning in their severity here, where you've got Travis Homer was limited on Wednesday and then DNP on Thursday, but okay, not that big of a deal. Travis Homer's not a key player, but then Roschon Johnson, DNP on Thursday with a thumb as well. And all of a sudden, those are your third and fourth string running backs, so no one's panicking. DeAndre Swift, full participant at practice. Obviously, Kyle Monangai's not even on the injury report. So your main rushers are okay, but your running back depth takes a hit there if those guys aren't able to go. I would imagine if you're down both of them, that they would consider promoting somebody like Britton Brown off the practice squad, who they brought up a couple weeks ago when DeAndre Swift missed that game. So there's at least some level of confidence that Brown can kind of plug in and at least do the bare minimum for you at the running back spot there, but something to keep an eye on there. But again, I think the bigger good news there is that, we've seen Swift be limited at practice, and mentioned just now that he missed a game, but he was a full participant on Thursday. after being limited on Wednesday and being limited in some recent weeks. And it's worth mentioning, too, Jaquan Brisker goes from DNP on Wednesday with a shoulder injury to a full participant on Thursday with, progress in the right direction. So Byard's healthy, Brisker's getting healthier, Grady Jarrett's healthy now, Jaylon Johnson's full participant, DeAndre Swift's full participant. There's guys coming back, and even if we have some lingering question marks about some of the offensive linemen, you feel like, hey, you can find some general positive injury news for the offense there. I am curious if and when the Bears activate Jaylon Johnson from injured reserve, they're going to have to free up a roster spot for him and put, either cut someone or put someone else on injured reserve. I'm curious if any of these injured players, rise to that designation, that level of injury. Like any of these guys that are out right now or DNP, are they guys that could miss 4 weeks? It's that I don't think this will be TJ Edwards' third game. So if they were going to put him on injured reserve, they would have already. So that's not unless things somehow got worse. I'm not really worried about the linebackers landing there, but, could you stash Travis Homer on IR for 4 weeks or Roshan Johnson if they're not really playing that much at all anyway? Like probably not. So then, I don't know, do you release wide receiver Ja'Day Walker? He's been hurt with a concussion, or do you try and put him on the practice squad and release him? Or, they're back up to 5 healthy defensive ends now with Sweat, Booker, Robinson, Joe Tryon, who they traded for, and then Daniel Hardy's a special teams guy. Are they inclined to thin up? They've got 10 defensive linemen right now, because you also may want to call up a linebacker from the practice squad to your active roster, like Jalen Reeves-Maybin or Carl Jones. So you got to try and find wiggle room there. Or now that your cornerbacks are getting healthy, do you cut Jalen Jones, who they had signed off of, what was the Cardinals practice squad, I think, when Jaylon Johnson and company went down? Like now you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cornerbacks. If you're activating Jaylon Johnson and Kyler Gordon, you almost certainly have to cut a corner, and that'd either be Josh Blackwell or Jaylon Jones. I assume it would probably be Jaylon Jones at this point. But if you just activated one corner, then maybe given the precarious nature of the injuries, do you want to keep 7 on the roster just to make sure? I think it's a tough spot for Ryan Poles. There's not a lot of fat that you can trim on this roster right now. I look at 4 running backs, 10 defensive linemen, and 8 cornerbacks is kind of the main spots I would look at, or maybe the 6 wide receivers, but certainly wide receiver injuries have been a factor in here too. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle the transaction nature of this. Whatever good or bad Bears injury news we get on Sunday, you can be sure we'll break down everything that happens against the Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and also the #1 sports podcast network now. And if you're looking for a second listen, now that we're wrapping up Locked On Bears, you can go check out Locked On Steelers if you want to get to know the Bears opponent that much closer. We talked to Chris Carter on yesterday's Crossover Thursday podcast, but he does a great job of breaking down the Steelers. And if you want to get the latest on the Aaron Rodgers injury situation and what to expect from Pittsburgh, go make Locked On Steelers your second listen today. Come on back on Monday, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.